The scene shifted to the goblin tribe where the female goblin lived. In the night, there were many conical huts glowing brightly. Lin Tian and the female goblin arrived. He could smell something strange. The goblins inside the huts came out, one by one, then many more. They were holding sharp iron spears surrounding Lin Tian. They seemed curious about him. Why is he wearing human clothes? Ha ha ha. We've never seen such a strange thing. Ha ha ha. It's that monster who brought him here. Despite being in her own village, the female goblin still felt scared and hid behind Lin Tian. Lin Tian's expression turned serious as he carefully observed. He thought to himself, the number of goblins in this tribe is quite considerable. Let's begin. He stood in the middle of the low-level goblins, raised his voice and said loudly, I'm here to join you. Please, take me to your leader. The goblins glared at him, their spears at the ready. The female goblin, who had been holding Lin Tian's hand all this time, was still there. The goblins' eyes were bloodshot, their mouths making strange sounds. They kept chattering among themselves, but their spears still pointed at Lin Tian. One of them said, That strange thing from outside wants to meet the leader? Another replied, He wants to meet the leader? Let's capture him first, and then take him to the leader. It seemed that these goblins were smarter than those in Lin Tian's cave. The goblins continued chattering. Lin Tian was about to be caught. The female goblin behind him gathered all her courage. She shut her eyes tight and shouted loudly, He's not a bad person. Don't attack. Then she quickly spread her arms and stood in front of him, protecting him. At that moment, the leader of the goblin tribe must have heard the noise. A voice shouted, startling Lin Tian, Gather here. What's going on? Lin Tian had already seen the tribe leader. He attracted attention with a staff decorated with skulls, bones, and large animal claws. Lin Tian maintained his confident demeanor and didn't show any fear, even though the goblin in front of him was much larger than the smaller ones. This goblin was bigger, with larger ears, a longer nose, and 6 tusks instead of the usual 5. A system prompt immediately appeared in front of Lin Tian with information about the goblin. Large goblin, level 25, goblin race, profession, rebirth machine, title, life giver, health, 102, energy, 29, defense, 17, skills, summon, control, thorn dust, equipped with skull staff, bone chain, totem. The large goblin stepped forward, walking with a hunched posture. It opened its mouth wide, revealing sharp tusks, and shouted loudly, Who's making the noise? Lin Tian's eyes showed caution. This was beyond his expectations. He had thought the goblins here would be similar to those in his cave from the past. He never expected to meet such a high-level opponent. Frowning, he thought, How is there such a high-level goblin in this tribe? The goblin leader, holding the skull staff, pointed at Lin Tian and looked over, asking the female goblin, Did you bring an outsider here? The female goblin hesitated and answered, I brought him here. He has nowhere else to go. Lin Tian still maintained his cautious attitude. The low-level goblins were all waiting for the signal from the leader to attack and tear Lin Tian apart. As soon as the female goblin finished speaking, the goblin leader grinned widely and shouted, Good! This one's blood looks nice. His eyes turned red as he eagerly looked at Lin Tian. He immediately pointed his skull staff at Lin Tian and yelled, Kill it! Then eat this monster! One of the goblins rushed forward and pushed the female goblin aside, making her fall to the ground. It laughed loudly. Ha ha ha! This is great! Another goblin quickly charged at Lin Tian with a spear in hand. It smirked hungrily, saying, Ha ha ha! Time to eat! Then, the entire group of goblins shouted in unison, Ha ha ha! Let's eat it! Let's eat! The situation quickly became chaotic. In the chaos, Lin Tian quickly reached into his shirt and pulled out the only weapon he had, a dagger. He then raised the iron dagger in front of him and stared directly at the goblin leader. He spoke loudly and confidently. Wait, I know how to craft weapons. Please allow me to join your tribe. I can make you stronger." As soon as the goblin leader heard that Lin Tian knew how to craft weapons, he raised his hand, signaling for the goblin servants to stop. He slowly walked toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian, cautious, kept the dagger in front of him, preparing for anything. The situation was extremely dangerous. Lin Tian was facing a level 25 goblin, while he had only just begun leveling up. Lin Tian froze, standing still as the goblin leader approached. The goblin leader stuck his pockmarked nose right under Lin Tian's chin, his red eyes glaring at him. "You don't smell like a liar. Tell me, what kind of weapons can you craft?" It seemed the goblin leader had recognized Lin Tian's credibility. With the goblin leader's approval, Lin Tian wasn't hesitant to explain his plan. He explained that as long as he could find the necessary materials, he could make simple iron weapons. "Just give me some time, and I can make not only the dagger in my hand but even stronger weapons." The goblin leader was very interested in this. He listened carefully to Lin Tian's every word. Lin Tian, meanwhile, thought to himself that this goblin leader could actually speak complete sentences. It seemed that the higher the goblin's level, the smarter they were. Lin Tian noticed that the goblins in this tribe were clearly fascinated by weapons. They looked longingly at the small dagger in Lin Tian's hand. Encouraged, Lin Tian continued to persuade the leader. "With iron weapons, you'll be able to defeat both animals and humans easily." The goblins seemed to have an insatiable desire for iron weapons, thinking that with them, they could defeat everyone. Upon hearing this, the goblins began to chatter excitedly, shouting, "Ha ha, iron weapons, no fear of humans. This is great. Meat to eat." Each one of them voiced their desires, with some saying, "Ha ha, I like the monkeys more." Another shouted, "Ha ha, iron weapons, go to the north. Ha ha, mate with the elves." The goblin leader then grabbed Lin Tian's hand. He changed his attitude, no longer hostile. His face relaxed as he spoke. The goblin leader said, "I will give you a chance. In 3 days, you must find the necessary ore to make iron items. If you can do that, I will spare your life." After that, his face grew dark, and he continued threatening in a low voice, "If you fail, you will die." He pointed his sharp finger at the female goblin and shouted loudly, "And you too!" After speaking, he laughed loudly, "Ha ha ha," and quickly turned around, walking away, followed by his goblin subordinates. One goblin even scratched its rear as it walked. Finally, everything was settled. Lin Tian gently sat beside the female goblin. He comforted her softly and helped her stand up. Lin Tian's mind raced. He thought to himself, "This goblin leader is truly cruel. He's gone mad. He doesn't even spare his own kind." Lin Tian reminded himself of how to deal with him in the coming days. With his current strength, he could not possibly face him head-on. He would have to find a way to buy more time to grow stronger. The next day, the goblins set off to find the ore. They did not return until late at night. The night was pitch black, and the sound of crows crying echoed through the dark, eerie forest. Leading the group was the goblin leader. Lin Tian was exhausted after a long day of walking. The female goblin, being weaker due to her gender, fell behind. She was small and delicate, carrying a bundle of firewood, dragging her feet as she followed. She panted heavily, sweat dripping from her face. "Wait for me," she said. "I'm too tired to go on." Without saying a word, one of the goblins gave her a harsh kick to the back. The goblins had no mercy. They kicked her everywhere. She screamed loudly, "Ha ha, you useless thing! If you don't find the I'll beat you to death." The female goblin curled up on the ground, enduring the kicks and begging, "Ah, it hurts. Please don't hit me. I won't do it again." The two goblins nearby also joined in, hitting her a few more times. They grew bolder, laughing. "Ha ha, find the ore or die." Due to the pain, the female goblin curled up like a shrimp. Suddenly, a large rock flew through the air, hitting the goblin that had been causing trouble. It made the goblin flinch, rubbing its head. It bared its teeth and glared at Lin Tian. The others stopped their bullying of the female goblin. Lin Tian scolded them sharply. "You are here to help find the ore, not to fight." He interrupted them, his voice stern as he warned. This is what the ore looks like. As I told you, if you want to live, go to the valley in front of you and find me some iron ore quickly. Otherwise, Lin Tian pulled a dagger from his sleeve and held it out in front of them. His eyes were sharp, and his face was filled with murderous intent as he loudly declared, "You will all die." Upon hearing the words die, the ugly goblins trembled in fear. They scattered, running for their lives to find the ore. One of them shouted, "Hez taking the iron! Ha ha ha! Run away!" Despite running off, some still left behind a few threatening words. "Wait until we find the ore. The boss will not spare you." The girl, bruised and battered, sat huddled on the ground. She watched as they ran off and sighed in relief. As for Lin Tian, after hearing the goblins' words, his face darkened. His earlier arrogant attitude vanished. He realized they were right. Even if he could make the iron items sooner or later, he would be killed. He put the dagger back in his sleeve. Lin Tian glanced at the female goblin, who was crying and wiping her tears continuously. In this situation, a system notification appeared, reminding Lin Tian that if a male goblin and a female goblin mated, the male would become a legendary goblin god. Lin Tian felt very conflicted. He had once been a human in the modern world, with different thoughts compared to this world. He still hoped for a beautiful love. However, in this world, he had to grow stronger to survive. For this race, Lin Tian had no choice but to rely on mating to gain strength. If that was the only way to survive in this new world, he would accept it. He thought that perhaps he should focus on getting stronger. The female goblin kept crying. She sat on the ground, covered in dirt, constantly wiping her tears. She looked pitiful. Lin Tian spoke softly. "Goblin, don't cry anymore." After saying these comforting words, he took the initiative to move closer, kneeling down. For the first time, Lin Tian was so close to a female goblin. He placed his hand on her cheek and gently wiped her tears with his thumb. Looking directly into her eyes, he asked, "Goblin, will you agree to follow me? From now on, if you follow me, I will protect you, feed you meat, and provide you with a warm place to stay. No one will dare to bully you." Upon hearing these words from Lin Tian, the female goblin was stunned. She widened her eyes, staring at him, and blushed. She nervously replied, "Really?" Seeing her still confused, Lin Tian, with a very serious expression, reassured her. "Of course. When I say something, I mean it. But now we are too weak. If we want to stop being bullied, I need your help to become stronger." The female goblin had lived with the goblin tribe her whole life. Her life had been tough enough. When she heard Lin Tian promise to feed her and protect her, she believed him. The girl looked at Lin Tian with innocent eyes and asked him, "How can I become stronger?" Lin Tian quickly seized the opportunity. He spoke seriously. "As long as you agree to have children with me, I will become stronger." When she heard this, the girl seemed to understand a bit. Her face turned even redder, feeling hot. The female goblin huddled and covered her mouth, saying, "Can I really become stronger? But I have never tried." Lin Tian couldn't hide his own embarrassment. He lowered his head, letting his hood cover his flushed face, and said, "It's fine, as long as you agree." Before he could finish, Lin Tian quickly moved, and in a flash, he kissed the female goblin. They became one, deeply involved. Ha ha ha. This part is for the brothers who haven't got their hands on the pen for a review. Please understand. Afterward, Lin Tian pushed the female goblin to the ground. Their 10 fingers intertwined after a passionate kiss. The female goblin fully agreed to Lin Tian, offering her most precious gift to him. She gasped for breath and said, "I want you to become stronger." She opened her arms, signaling a smile for Lin Tian. And blushing, she added, "Please let me have your child." By this point, the brothers can understand what is about to happen, right? The female goblin's strange expression was like she sensed something. Yes, suddenly, a system notification popped up. The host and the female goblin now have 7 children. They have leveled up to the highest rank. The female goblin's expression was one of strength. She frowned and screamed, while the system continued. Due to limited potential, the maximum level has been reached. Attack value plus 100. Life value plus 100. Defense plus 10. After working hard for 2 hours, the main character Lin Tian was exhausted, panting heavily. Sweat dripped all over his body. At that moment, the system displayed the information showing the level changes of the female goblin. Female goblin level 7, max level 17, goblin race. Profession: low-level demon beast, defiler of gods, bearer of blessings. Life: 40, energy: 10, defense: 9, skills: unknown, equipment: none, total: 65. Tian roared with a new source of power. He looked at his 2 hands, full of spiritual energy, and exclaimed. Not only had his level increased, but even his form had improved. Not only had his martial arts skills been upgraded, but his physical and biological strength had also increased. The appearance of the goblin had become more appealing. His muscles were now more defined. He told himself that his chances of winning against the goblin had become much greater. Once everything was done, Lin Tian took the cloak and gently draped it over her. He softly spoke to her. From now on, you are mine. I will protect you for the rest of your life. After the battle, the female goblin was still quite tired and collapsed into Lin Tian's arms. She weakly said, Lin Tian, you are so good. The scene at that moment was enchanting. The two were intimate, but before long, a voice from another goblin calling for help broke their moment. They both jumped and looked toward the source of the screams. At that moment, they saw the goblin holding a piece of ore in its arms, its eyes closed tightly, running while crying out, Save me! Save me! Behind it was a large wolf. This wolf was not an ordinary wolf. Its whole body radiated a purple aura, and its eyes were bloodshot as it bared its fangs, chasing after the goblin. Lin Tian then noticed that the goblin was holding an iron ore. He unconsciously thought that the goblin had indeed found the ore, but brought back a small trouble. He quickly changed his mindset from surprise to combat mode. Lin Tian drew his dagger and spoke seriously to the female goblin behind him in a warm voice. Stay here and wait for me. Upon hearing this, the female goblin felt delighted and shyly replied, Lin Tian, be careful. The situation was now urgent. The large wolf, with its mouth full of sharp fangs, was about to bite the goblin in front of it. The goblin ran desperately, not daring to look back. Without hesitation, Lin Tian sprinted forward. He leaped into the air and used the dagger to slash deeply into the wolf's neck with a powerful strike. The wolf, unexpectedly attacked, howled in pain. It threw its head back, still keeping its mouth open, but this time, it was in agony. The goblin, still clutching the iron ore, was stunned. She was startled to see Lin Tian, who with just one stab of his dagger had brought down a wolf 10 times larger than the goblin. The wolf fell to the ground with a loud crash. Lin Tian stood next to the fallen wolf, and the female goblin was left in shock. After solving this small problem, Lin Tian turned toward the goblin. The small goblin saw the aura of Lin Tian, which was full of power and incredibly fierce. It stood, holding the iron ore, its hands and legs shaking. Lin Tian only said one thing, Well done. Give me the ore. The goblin, no longer as stubborn as before, was visibly scared. It raised both hands and offered the iron ore to him. When Lin Tian got closer and saw the ore, he was visibly pleased. He smiled and ordered, Not bad. Find more of this. When we return, I'll make weapons for you. His confidence was clear. The goblin was very confused. It couldn't do much more, only nodding repeatedly in agreement. The next morning, in the deep forest, a white smoke rose from afar, and the thing being cooked in the pot. Lin Tian, satisfied, said, It should be ready now. The surrounding goblins scrambled forward to take a look. Ha ha! He really made it. What is that? It looks so strange. Will it work? The sharp spear pierced the head of the wolf with a clean strike. Hearing was not as good as seeing. This was enough to prove to the low-level goblins that Lin Tian's weapon was effective. Under their amazed stares, Lin Tian smiled and pulled the spear out, proudly stating, "This is the weapon I made from iron ore." A goblin who had gone with Lin Tian to find the ore quickly ran over, pointing at him and shouting, "He used the weapon to kill the werewolf and saved us." Upon hearing this, the goblins cheered. "Ha ha ha! He really can make weapons. This spear is truly powerful." After a round of cheering, Lin Tian raised the spear high, standing above the low-level goblins. He shouted loudly, "Do you want this?" All the goblins immediately rushed towards the spear with greedy, ambitious eyes, shouting, "Yes, yes." The leader, seeing his subordinates running towards Lin Tian with admiration in their eyes, realized that although his subordinates were not very intelligent, their survival instincts made them gravitate toward strength. The leader saw Lin Tian as the biggest threat to his position, and his mind began to work faster than usual. He slammed his staff onto the ground with a loud thud. The entire group of goblins looked at the leader in shock. His eyes flashed with danger as he looked at Lin Tian and smirked. He said, "Indeed, you're not lying. You really can make weapons from iron ore." Although he said it with a smile, the entire group could feel the atmosphere around them turn cold. They dared not make a sound. The leader, quick to respond, immediately smiled, showing his teeth, and looked at Lin Tian with a sly glint in his eyes. "But if you want to stay, it won't be that simple. In 2 days, you must make 10 weapons like that." After saying that, he turned and gritted his teeth in anger. The goblins around him, although not very bright, could sense something was off. One of them, standing nearby, muttered, "Why is the leader so nasty, just like humans?" The goblin with the purple head, whom Lin Tian had saved earlier, immediately approached and said, "Haha, you can make more weapons, Lin Tian. I can help." Lin Tian, upon hearing that, lowered his head and said nothing, hiding his expression. After the leader left, Lin Tian raised an eyebrow and smiled as he watched the leader's back. Time passed quickly, and the day of delivery arrived. A basket of spears and weapons was completed, just as promised to the big boss. Lin Tian said, "The items you wanted, here they are." The goblins were overjoyed. They jumped up and cheered, "Lin Tian! Lin Tian! Lin Tian!" Lin Tian watched as they cheered him on like a god, while the leader, who was supposed to be the boss, was left out. The leader, thinking he could make things difficult for Lin Tian and teach him a lesson, felt a sting of frustration deep inside. However, on the surface, he still had to smile and say, "You actually did it. Well done." He raised his staff and shouted to his subordinates, "Tonight, we feast on meat to celebrate Lin Tian joining us." Hearing this, the goblins were excited and cheered, holding their new weapons. "Ha ha ha ha, great!" In contrast to their joy, Lin Tian said nothing. He simply stood there. The goblins gathered more firewood to roast a wild boar to celebrate. The delicious golden-brown meat smelled so good that just the aroma made them salivate. Goblin Moon quickly grabbed a piece of meat and brought it to Lin Tian, her face blushing as she handed it to him, saying, "Lin Tian, please accept it. I kept it for you." Lin Tian's face remained indifferent, showing no sign of happiness. He simply nodded, accepting the meat and taking a bite. Suddenly, as if sensing something, his eyes widened and his pupils shrank. The veins on his face were clearly visible. Pain suddenly overwhelmed him, causing him to grit his teeth. He felt like he couldn't breathe, as if someone was choking him. He bent over and collapsed to the ground. Goblin Moon saw this and immediately became scared, anxiously asking, "Lin Tian, what's wrong?" She was extremely worried about him and tried to help him stand. Suddenly, a goblin appeared, and the sound of triumphant laughter echoed. It turned out to be the so-called big boss of the goblin group. Ha ha ha, so foolish. You thought you were so clever, huh? Outsider, don't think I don't see through your ambitions. Daring to challenge the power of my priesthood, there's only one path for you: death. He said this, extending his claws and grabbing Goblin Mun by the hair. You seem to care about him, huh? Facing the priest, Goblin Mun endured the pain on her scalp but dared not resist or scream. She knew that this person was entirely devoid of humanity. Screaming would only make her death even more tragic. He then laughed and said, "Then enjoy watching this traitor's head get severed by his own blade." His sharp claws slowly sliced into her neck. Hearing the priest's words, Goblin Mun couldn't hold back the tears. She was deeply worried and glanced at Lin Tian. He laughed loudly and yelled, "Let's see if you can still be proud in front of me." The smell of blood spread everywhere. In that moment, her heart seemed to stop. Everything seemed to freeze. Goblin Mun's eyes grew dull, as if she could feel her life slipping away, drawing closer to its end. The sharp claws came down like the scythe of death. But just in a few seconds, the situation was reversed. Everyone thought Lin Tian was dead, but now he stood before the priest, holding a sharp blade in his hand. The speed of his strike was like a flash, slicing off the priest's hand, which fell to the ground with a thud. Goblin Mun fell, shocked and unable to react in time. She was completely stunned by what had just happened. The goblins stood frozen, unable to move, just watching the scene unfold. The so-called big boss, in pain, held his severed arm, gritting his teeth and glaring at Lin Tian with eyes full of hatred. He yelled, "How could you?" Lin Tian raised an eyebrow, holding the blade, and looked at the priest as though he were already dead. He laughed and said, "The fool here is you, old man. You are really despicable." Lin Tian sneered at the priest's actions. "I already knew from the system that you would poison me. I was just playing along with you." The priest, losing his arm, lowered his head in defeat, his body filled with a deathly aura. Enraged, he ripped off the rope. The weapon was raised high, with the skull ready to strike at Lin Tian. He shouted loudly, "I will kill you." Seeing his move, Lin Tian quickly entered a defensive stance, holding the blade in front of him. It might have been because the priest had lost his hand and was enduring the pain, but his actions had significantly slowed. As he approached, Lin Tian simply sidestepped and easily dodged his strike. However, the priest still hadn't recovered from his missed attack. The opportunity came. From behind, Lin Tian gathered his strength, leaped forward, and made a swift, clean sword strike. The priest realized that danger was close, and his eyes filled with panic, but he had no chance to fight back. With a single slash, the priest's head was severed from his body, and blood splattered everywhere. The priest didn't even have time to scream. His pupils turned white, and he breathed his last. The head of the priest fell to the ground, and the goblins witnessed the gruesome scene in horror. Lin Tian stood tall, holding the blade in his hand like the harbinger of death. He took a step forward, causing the goblins to panic and scatter, afraid they would be the next to die. Lin Tian shouted loudly, "From now on, I am the boss of all of you." Upon hearing this, the goblins trembled in fear, not daring to speak. Lin Tian then yelled, "I will lead you to attack the elves, to attack humans." Upon hearing these words, the goblins were stunned, their minds not yet processing. Lin Tian walked over to Goblin Mun, helped her up, and raised the blade towards the sky, shouting loudly, "Victory is inevitable. The food never ends." The goblins, upon hearing this, felt like they had been injected with a stimulant. They quickly adapted to the situation. The goblins, in unison, cheered, "Ha ha ha, boss! Boss! Boss!" Lin Tian had achieved his goal. He pointed towards the priest's corpse and said, "This is for you." As he pointed, the goblins' eyes were fixed on the body. One by one, they rushed forward, eagerly tearing into the flesh of the former boss. Lin Tian stood still, holding Goblin Mun, watching the scene unfold. He raised an eyebrow, his gaze deep, and a smirk appeared on his face. Conquering the goblin tribe was just the beginning of my revenge. Next, I will focus on the elven tribe and ensure the future of this tribe is secure. A figure emerged from the dense bushes behind, observing the tribe. What was happening here? It was an elven girl, her head wrapped in a scarf, silently watching the events unfold before her. The full moon shone brightly, casting its light on the elven tribe deep in the forest. A swift figure nimbly jumped over obstacles, advancing towards the highest floor. Below, the dead goblins hung from their heads, the sound of bones clashing as the figure climbed to the next level. An elf, seeing this, hurriedly ran out to greet the princess. "You're back, princess." She saw the elven princess heading toward the queen's chamber. The servant quickly stopped her. "Princess, please wait." The princess, Kasana, ignored the servant's pleas and continued straight toward the chamber. "Stop! I have something to report." The servant struggled to block her path, but the princess easily pushed open the door, shouting, "Mother, I have something to report." Inside the room, a figure was lying on the bed. The person had long legs and 2 large melons on her chest. The princess instantly recognized her. "It's definitely my mother." The woman on the bed was not wearing a shirt, one breast exposed on each side, with someone offering fruit and feeding her, while a servant massaged her shoulders. The princess was taken aback. "Oh my God, what is happening here?" Her eyes widened in embarrassment, stammering, I'm sorry, Mother. I'll go ahead and leave now." She turned quickly, wanting to flee the scene, but froze in place. The queen, seeing Kasana, immediately signaled the attendants to step aside, then gently massaged her temples and said, "Hold on, princess." The princess, with a serious expression, turned to her mother and said, "Mother, there's an urgent matter related to the goblin tribe in the forest that I need to report." "The goblins?" The queen responded, her face indifferent. "Goblins. Those low-level monsters, dirty and weak. What can they possibly do?" To the queen, they were just lowly creatures, not worth mentioning. Seeing that her mother did not seem to believe her, Princess Kasana immediately continued. "Earlier today, in the enchanted forest, I found a giant black bear that had been mauled. The area showed signs of struggle and hunting, surrounded by goblin footprints, as if the goblins in the forest had been involved. The enchanted forest had made the giant black bear the most vicious monster in the forest. According to theory, goblins should not be able to kill such a high-level monster." After a series of events she investigated, Princess Kasana looked at her mother seriously and said, "A few days ago, I saw the leader of the goblin tribe being killed by a younger goblin. The unusual movements of the goblins may be related to him." The queen listened but remained indifferent, dismissing her concern. "The new leader? The queen seemed to think of something, then lay back on the bed, her long fingers beckoning the attendant closer. She smiled and looked at Princess Kasana. "It seems the number of goblins in the forest has recovered somewhat. Kasana, take some people and deal with the goblins, but this time don't kill them all like before. Leave a few alive." She then laughed softly, her hand lightly caressing the attendant's abs, looking at Kasana with a playful, expectant gaze. Her voice was full of excitement as she continued, "We can use the goblin hearts as tonics for the male elves in our tribe." Kasana blushed, her face turning red as she shyly replied, Yes, mother." Seeing her daughter working so hard for the entire tribe, the queen, as a mother, couldn't help but show more affection. The queen narrowed her eyes, her expression tender as she said, "My dear princess, you've worked hard these past few days. Tonight, I'll reward you with a male elf. Is that enough? If not, I can offer more." Kasana, shocked by her mother's words, quickly turned bright red. Her face was filled with panic as she stammered, "Mother, I still have to investigate tonight. I'll report back to you later." Returning to the goblin tribe, the protagonist, by the crackling fire, was surrounded by goblins. On the ground, branches were laid out, and one goblin said, "Boss, a branch represents a treehouse in the forest. The elven tribe has about 30 treehouses." Hearing the report from the goblin with purple hair, Lin Tian showed great satisfaction. His eyes gleamed with admiration as he smiled and said, "Well done. After we finish with the elven tribe, I'll reward you with 2 elves." He then ordered everyone to sharpen their weapons. Hearing the reward of 2 elves, the purple-haired goblin's eyes widened, and he shouted in extreme joy, "2 elves!" The entire group cheered. "Ha ha ha! Boss!" The purple-haired goblin licked his lips eagerly and cheerfully walked out, laughing. "I'll go tell the others to prepare their weapons." Lin Tian, glancing at the figure of his subordinate, immediately realized that with their intelligence, all it would take was a simple trick to fool them. He stared at the branches on the ground, deep in thought. 30 elven tree houses, each with 2 elves. That's a total of 60 elves. He picked up a branch and inspected it, then calculated. Plus, about 10 goblins occupying the mining area, at least 70 elves in total. Reflecting on the time since he became the leader of the Goblin tribe, Lin Tian had led them to forge weapons from the minerals they gathered and use them to kill monsters, improving their ranks. If the tribe was to become strong, they needed to nurture their soldiers first. It was a necessary strategy. Lin Tian raised his spear high, addressing his subordinates. "From now on, we hunt and kill the monsters in the enchanted forest. Is that clear?" The entire group responded in unison. "Yes, boss." Under the night sky, the group headed into the forest under the guidance of their cunning goblin leader. Within moments, a wild boar was defeated. Lin Tian panted heavily, and a system notification rang out. Achieved the skill. Attack by spear. They entered the Monster Stone area with a perfect strategy, fighting with exceptional coordination. Another system notification sounded. Achieved the skill. Stone transformation. The goblins and Lin Tian fought side by side, defeating fierce beasts like leopards and monkeys. Another notification came. Achieved the skill. Stealth and climbing. The goblins were hungry, and even the smallest beasts couldn't escape their grasp. In no time, they had become food for the goblins. Another notification sounded. Achieved the skill. Poison spit. With their innate talent, the goblins used the skill to swallow and digest, gaining numerous skills in the process. Their levels also increased. The one leading the change was the purple-haired goblin. His profile showed rippling muscles, and he had reached level 18. His title was Low-Level Monster, Divine Blessing, Monster Slayer, Beast Assassin. His stats were as follows. Health 231, Energy 29, Defense 40, Skills, Sharp Teeth, Poisonous Spit, Bloodthirsty Wolf. Lin Tian thought about his future plan to conquer the elven tribe. The fighting strength of each elf would be around 200. He then thought about his own tribe. Lin Tian stroked his chin, deep in thought. Proudly smiling, the combined combat strength of the tribe had surpassed that of the elves, and Lin Tian was extremely pleased, thinking about his future empire. The system suddenly lit up with a notification. System simulation completed. Lin Tian looked at the message content displayed and thought to himself. However, he muttered aloud, "Anyway, it's still an attack on the elf territory. I must remain cautious." He immediately shouted, "System, begin simulation." The content was quickly displayed. Simulation of Goblin's life has begun. Then once again the content changed, and even included illustrated images of the storyline. The night before the raid, you, the commander of the Goblin army, were preparing for the raid on the elf tribe, confident that the attack would succeed. However, to your surprise, the elves had set up an ambush. After leading the Goblin army into a trap, the elf forces killed you. The elves captured you and hung your body in the forest for display, alongside the other goblins. Initially, everything seemed perfect, but in the end, it was all a trap. The results were unexpected. The system displayed. Score. No points awarded. Rewards. None. After finishing the simulation, Lin Tian immediately furrowed his brows, his expression growing serious. "So, this is the kind of outcome?" they had everything under control? Lin Tian stood up abruptly. His subordinates, noticing this, immediately became alert, scanning their surroundings. With such low stats, they could never betray him. If this kind of result appeared, there could only be one possibility. Lin Tian quickly looked around. It was clear that the tribe had been under surveillance by the elves. While the goblins were still scanning the area, Lin Tian immediately activated his goblin skills. Sound waves spread out over a wide area. The goblins' hearing and sense of smell were highly developed. By focusing their attention, they could surely detect clues. Lin Tian's ears twitched, and from a nearby bush, he sensed eyes carefully scanning them. Found them. They were hiding here, eavesdropping. The moonlight in the sky seemed to have changed. With rustling sounds, elf figures cloaked in hoods leapt over the treetops. Leading the group was Princess Kasana of the elves. Her face was extremely serious as she shouted, "The goblins are trying to raid our tribe!" I didn't expect that in just a few days the tribe would change this much. We need to report this to my mother immediately. Let's go. Her subordinates quickly followed her. Immediately the response was given. Yes, understood. Before they could go far, poisoned arrows tore through the air, whizzing past. One arrow hit the peach of Princess Kasana. She felt pain and lost her balance. She immediately fell and screamed loudly. Finally, she landed with a loud thud. After falling, Kasana felt her body losing strength. She seemed unable to move, breathing heavily, no longer able to summon any strength. She observed that her subordinates had already been wiped out, scattered across the ground. A goblin joyfully shouted, "Boss! Boss!" The shot was perfect. The goblin was referring to the elf girl, Kasana. When the goblin got closer, Kasana immediately tried to flee, but her body had no strength. Her body felt strange. Could it be the poison? This is it, she thought. Lin Tian approached, and upon seeing the situation, immediately smiled. I didn't expect it to be so easy to catch you. Looking down from above at Kasana, Lin Tian said, "You showed up at just the right time." Lin Tian looked at Kasana indifferently and commanded, "Take all of them back to me." His subordinates immediately shouted, "Pour water on her, to wake her up." A cold splash of water poured over Kasana's head, gradually waking her up. She opened her eyes. "Boss is here. Quickly, quickly." Her consciousness slowly cleared, but she was still dazed, not understanding what was happening. A hand reached out in front of her and grabbed her face, inspecting her like an item for sale. The goblin with purple hair kept pushing forward, eager to take credit. He rubbed his hands together, licking his lips, looking at Kasana with a hungry expression. "Boss, the elf girl is especially reserved for you." Another goblin, also full of ambition, added, "We've been waiting for the boss to arrive." Lin Tian seemed to understand, realizing that the goblin liquid had a special effect on female creatures, causing paralysis and excitement. In this way, the chances of defeating the elf tribe, which revered the matriarchal system, would be higher. Kasana looked at the goblins in disgust, nearly vomiting. She clenched her teeth in anger, glaring at them and muttering, "You lowly creatures dare to kidnap me, the princess, and even target the elf tribe?" Then, in a fit of rage, she raised her head and shouted, "If it weren't for my mother's mercy, you wretches would have been wiped out long ago. If you dare to touch even a single hair of mine, my mother will never forgive you." Lin Tian seemed to hear the funniest story ever. He sneered and smiled. How amusing. He pushed Kasana down and said from above, "Stand up, stand up." He looked at her like a clown. He coldly said, "Humph, mercy." How interesting. Losing balance. Kasana fell down, and the mocking laughter of the goblins echoed around her. Lin Tian calmly said, "Goblins in your mouth and elves in our tribe don't seem to be quite the same." Then he pointed to his subordinate with purple hair. "This is your living witness." He continued, "Although our tribe is very foolish, we won't say something we don't know. The IQ of our tribe is not high, but don't try to deceive me. It's clear that elves could easily wipe out all the goblins in the forest." Kasana was startled when she heard this. Just as he said, Her mother had mentioned leaving some alive. These goblins were usually very foolish, but now... Lin Tian continued. But there are still many goblins living in the forest. It's not just out of mercy. Kasana was still in shock, her body slow to react. But she knew that if she continued like this, there would definitely be no good outcome. Before she could react, Lin Tian spoke again. In the end, it doesn't matter why. Tonight, I will lead the tribe to investigate. After speaking, he smiled at her with a hint of hidden meaning. Before we investigate, we need to deal with all these corpses first. These corpses could enhance the skills of my subordinates. They cannot be wasted. Lin Tian turned to his subordinates and said, "You all divide and consume the corpses of the 2 dead elves, carefully absorbing their skills." Upon hearing this, the subordinates cheered, excited and in disbelief at what they had just heard. Kasana was immediately terrified and screamed, "What?" Lin Tian turned to look at Kasana and, with the indifferent gaze of a superior, said, "What about her?" Then he slowly approached her. In Kasana's horrified gaze, she stepped back, trembling and pleading, "Lin Tian, don't. A scream echoed through the air before fading into silence. After a moment, the system displayed, "Congratulations, you have reached the maximum level. Plus 30, due to your potential reaching the highest level. Converted into vitality, plus 50 energy, plus 10 defense, plus 10. You have gained the skill of a stealth creature and the skill of a disguised creature." Meanwhile, in the elf tribe, in the warm, small room of the matriarch, a soft, male voice rang out. "Matriarch, I can't hold on any longer." The feminine, spoiled voice continued, "But I am not satisfied. Let's stop for today. The medicine is used up. How heartbreaking. If I had known this earlier, I would have captured more goblins." The matriarch gently stroked and looked at the servant in her arms with full sympathy. Sweat was dripping. But these things were not enough to satisfy the matriarch's wishes. Since Kasana left, it had already been some time. The beautiful servant by her side had withered, lying on the bed, barely breathing. Seeing that the situation was wrong, the matriarch called someone and asked, "Has Kasana not returned yet?" The bodyguard kneeled down respectfully and replied, "Yes, matriarch. Katana has been gone for a while. By now, she should have returned." The bodyguard appeared very worried and continued, "Matriarch, should we send someone to check? Perhaps we can kill more goblins to help strengthen the other warriors in the tribe." Seeing that her child still had not returned and what the bodyguard said made sense, the matriarch rubbed her temples and said, "Take some warriors to the goblin tribe to support Kasana." "Why is that girl taking so long?" Lost in thought, she suddenly heard a voice say, "Your Kasana will not return today." The bodyguard immediately turned around, drawing his sword from his waist and shouting, "Who's there?" The matriarch looked outside cautiously, her eyes full of vigilance. Then a series of arrows shot out swiftly and struck the bodyguard in the forehead before he could even groan. He fell down immediately. The matriarch looked toward the fallen bodyguard with a terrified expression. She caught the arrow and turned toward the window in disbelief. The matriarch stammered, Goblin?" Lin Tian casually walked into the room, followed by 2 of his subordinates. He looked at the matriarch slowly and said, "Katana has already been captured by me, and soon, my own child will be born." He approached, looking at the matriarch with the gaze of a superior, and smiled arrogantly. He then said, "We are one family now." The matriarch quickly drew the sword from the head of the bed and advanced toward Lin Tian and the goblins. Raising the sword in anger, she shouted, "What have you done to my Kasana?" Lin Tian looked at the matriarch with a mischievous look and said, "What do you think?" Then he laughed heartily. The matriarch was furious, charging toward him with the sword in hand, shouting, "I will kill you, you insolent goblin!" But with a swift sidestep, Lin Tian easily caused the matriarch to lose her balance and nearly fall to the ground. Lin Tian looked at the matriarch on the floor with disdain and said, "Your tribe has been surrounded. Surrender, and I will treat you well." The matriarch's body seemed to collapse as she tried to move but couldn't. Lin Tian looked down at her pitiful form and sneered. Even though you want to use all your strength, your body can't keep up. He paused, giving the matriarch a moment to understand the situation. Just now, I shot an arrow with the goblin's essence. Once it comes into contact, it quickly paralyzes the target. I advise you to be honest. Despite all efforts, the matriarch realized that her body had no strength left. She could only curse under her breath. Lin Tian raised the matriarch's face with a knife and said, I overheard you talking about level-up tools and stimulant drugs. It turns out that the elves have been exploiting goblins like this all along. Only now did I realize that my tribe has such powerful abilities. He paused. But I guess you never expected that one day the goblins would come for your elf tribe to settle the score, right? At that moment, the matriarch recalled what Katana had told her about a new goblin leader. Lin Tian raised the knife to her chin. The matriarch's eyes were filled with horror. Could this goblin be the leader Katana had mentioned? Suddenly, a voice rang out from outside, shouting, "Kill him!" The matriarch, startled, looked toward the window and asked, "What is that noise?" Lin Tian said, "It seems like there's not much time left." The younger brother with purple hair looked down at the battle below the city walls. Lin Tian smiled like a cunning fox, while the matriarch walked closer to the window to see what was happening below. All right. Now we should talk about cooperation. The matriarch's expression changed slightly. Her eyes widened in shock at what was unfolding below. The elves were screaming in the flames. "Help! Matriarch! Save us! We don't want to be taken by the goblins." Countless corpses lay on the ground. The goblins were sweeping through the tribe, laughing and cheering. The matriarch shouted in anger, "What have you done to my tribe?" Lin Tian, uninterested in her emotional outburst, calmly replied, "The current strength of the goblins is no weaker than the elves. You have no ability to resist." He continued, "When the elves were strong enough to kill goblins, now the goblins are strong enough to take revenge. I advise you to understand reality." Lin Tian leaned closer to the matriarch's ear and whispered, "I need stronger goblin warriors, so I still need you." He then brought the knife closer to the matriarch's smooth face, as if reminding her to behave. The matriarch's pupils shrank, unable to believe this was happening to her tribe. To clarify further, Lin Tian said, "As for whether you live or die after this, it depends on the attitude of the matriarch." The scene below continued. The goblins roared. With just a few moves, they eliminated the elves, causing them to sink into agony. Victory made one a king, while defeat made one a bandit. Men became slaves. Women became concubines. The outcome was already set. The matriarch, confused, had empty eyes as she knelt on the cold ground. At this moment, she mustered her strength to kneel toward Lin Tian, reaching out and pleading, "As long as you don't kill my children, as long as they can continue to live, I will do whatever you ask." She then began to make a decision. The matriarch started to remove her clothing, covering her body with a piece of cloth, and said to Lin Tian in a humiliated manner, "I agree. I will stay with them and bear children for you." The next morning, the matriarch's voice, full of joy and fear, echoed through the deep forest of the goblin tribe. Inside a cage, she cried endlessly, pressing her face into the lap of the elf matriarch. "Mother, the goblins have captured us too. What are we going to do now?" The elf matriarch, heartbroken, approached and hugged her daughter, gently patting her head. "I'm sorry. It's my fault. I underestimated them. I didn't expect the goblins' strength to surpass that of the elves." She then grew deeply sorrowful, regretting that she had ignored the warnings of Kasana, which had led to this situation. Now, the elven tribe was reduced to only women and children, defenseless and unarmed, left to protect the bloodline of the elves. She continued to tell Kasana about the harsh reality. "We have already mated with the goblins. The elven tribe is now like sheep in a pen, completely unable to resist the goblins' power." The elf matriarch tightly embraced Kasana, who was covering her face and crying. "From now on, We will only be able to survive in the Goblin tribe. She tried to console her daughter as tears rolled down her cheeks. The two of them hugged each other in helplessness. Outside, Lin Tian witnessed everything. "Don't worry, you will wait for the breeding season inside. I will arrange your meals 3 times a day," he said clearly, looking at them from his position of authority. He then issued a warning. "If you have any malicious intentions, don't blame me for being merciless and killing you if you try to resist." He calmly sat down, crossing his legs on the altar. Upon hearing these words, the elf matriarch silently cried. She responded, "I understand." She understood the current situation of her tribe. However, she immediately gripped the iron bar in the cage, her gaze firm as she turned to Lin Tian and made a request. "But I have one request. These are all my children. Can I take care of them?" Even Kasana was greatly shocked upon seeing this, her eyes wide open. Lin Tian was equally astonished by the words of the elf matriarch. Not far away, Goblin Moon was playfully playing with a group of goblin children. Then, something crossed Lin Tian's mind. The system interface appeared, showing the attribute, Mother of Endless Love. Lin Tian suddenly seemed to understand. Is it because of the attribute, he thought? In an instant, a voice echoed, "Lin Tian, you can't take care of them all by yourself." Lin Tian turned silently and saw the children and Goblin Moon. He continued, "Give them to her. From now on, let her take care of the children." Looking back at the numbers, like a team of soccer players surrounding Goblin Moon, Lin Tian crossed his arms, pondering. After these elves grew up, they could provide energy that shouldn't be underestimated for the tribe. These children were the seeds of the future. For now, let's check the attributes. After mating with the matriarch, Lin Tian focused on the Mother of Endless Love attribute. Congratulations, the host has leveled up to the 4th rank. The transformation to life. Energy value has been completed. Plus 200 energy, plus 30 defense, plus 30. Lin Tian stroked his chin, deep in thought. Could it be that my potential has been unlocked to its highest level? His gaze remained fixed on the recent statistics, which had directly transformed into attributes. He then thought of the possible paths of development in the future. Lin Tian's gaze grew more determined, and he smiled happily. It seems that in the future, I just need to keep mating with the strong to directly enhance my power. His current strength was already enough to crush lower. After the elves reproduced, he would look for an opportunity to meet him. Time passed quickly, like a dog running through a field. Half of the battle had passed. The loud cries of a newborn child echoed, drawing goblins to the cage. A goblin child was born successfully. Goblin Ba looked excitedly at the baby and smiled. The elf, after giving birth, lay exhausted on the ground. Once she regained her strength, Goblin Ba picked up the child and left, leaving the elf behind. She quickly mumbled in fear and moved back to hide. Another goblin baby was crawling toward her. "Oh my God, is this the child I gave birth to? How disgusting. I don't want such a child. It's too scary." Next to her, another elf was holding her belly, preparing to give birth. Lin Tian and Goblin Moon were standing outside and could see everything happening inside. Lin Tian calmly glanced over the pregnant elves in the cage and asked Goblin Moon, "How many children have been born so far?" She picked up a child, breathing heavily, and counted for a while before thinking and then answering. "There should be around 3 or 4 now. Ah, it hurts." A sharp scream from Kasana echoed. Her eyes were wild and wide open as she screamed loudly. Lin Tian immediately turned to see what was happening with her. With a cautious look, he and Goblin Moon quickly ran to the cage where both Kasana and her child were. "Don't give up. Use your strength," the elf matriarch held a child in her arms, looking at Kasana sadly, guiding her through the childbirth process. Kasana, holding her belly in pain, lay on the ground, her head tilted back, her eyes tightly shut as she screamed, "I can't." The elf matriarch saw the situation worsening and urgently turned to Lin Tian, sweating from anxiety, and pleaded, "Please save her. This is her first time giving birth. She's going to die if this continues." Lin Tian quickly moved towards Kasana and called for Goblin Moon to help, telling her to spread Kasana's legs. The two of them approached. The elf matriarch became even more anxious. Goblin Moon separated Kasana's legs to assist Lin Tian in his actions. When the matriarch saw Lin Tian begin to help Kasana give birth, she was stunned and moved closer. You know about this? Despite the urgency around him, Lin Tian remained calm and spoke lightly. Just a little. The matriarch was even more astonished to see Lin Tian assisting with the delivery of her own granddaughter. Kasana suddenly became embarrassed, her eyes unwilling as she shouted, "Please don't! I don't want you to do this!" Lin Tian continued focusing on delivering the baby, completely ignoring her words. "Shut up. They are also my children," he said seriously, his eyes focused on the task at hand. After a while, he grabbed a towel and wiped his hands, saying, "She's fine now." Goblin Moon, watching, looked at him with bright eyes, excitedly saying, "Lin Tian, you're amazing. You saved her." But Lin Tian seemed unconcerned and continued wiping his hands. "It's nothing." Meanwhile, in the cage, the goblin children had been born successfully, mother and child safe. Around Kasana, she had fainted from exhaustion. Upon seeing her daughter safe, the elf matriarch was overjoyed. "Let me out." Suddenly, a scream rang out nearby, immediately drawing the attention of Lin Tian and Goblin Moon. They turned to look at the cage not far away, where two goblin children were fighting over who would get to humiliate the elf. "Heh, we can use them now. Let me go first." They laughed grotesquely as they moved closer, groping the elf inside the cage. A goblin had just imprisoned an elf who had recently given birth. With a quick swipe of a knife, it pierced through the goblin's body, killing him instantly. The other goblin, witnessing this, was terrified and froze, unable to move. This scene was deeply ingrained in his mind. Lin Tian withdrew his dagger, his voice cold as he spoke. "I told you." The remaining goblin instinctively crouched down, his limbs losing strength. The elf matriarch, standing behind, witnessed everything. In contrast to Lin Tian's calm actions, his current appearance resembled that of a fearsome being. His eyes bloodshot and filled with rage. His words were soft, but carried the imposing authority of a king. They must wait until they fully recover before reproducing again. "Who dares to defy me will die." He glanced at the goblin cowering on the ground and ordered, "From now on, every elf will receive more fruits than usual." The goblin could only lower his head in fear and respond, "Yes." At this moment, the elf matriarch looked at Lin Tian in a completely different light. She stepped forward and said, "It seems you are truly not like ordinary goblins." In response, Lin Tian remained indifferent, his eyes looking at her without much interest. He replied, "It's the right thing to do. As long as you treat them properly, things will go better." The system interface displayed images of the goblins completely conquering the elf tribe. The generations that followed would become even stronger. The scenario of the life script was now activated. The current plot was the capture of the elves. After much effort, the elf tribe had been caught, and all the female elves had been impregnated. After the elf women became pregnant, they would undergo a period of time before giving birth to stronger goblins. Usually, the members of the tribe would be prepared for the increase in strength. You decided to go and find the group of Lower to take revenge. You sneaked into the Bright City and successfully found the whereabouts of the hero party to take revenge on these two. You had already prepared for that day. You took action yourself to attempt to kill Lower and his group for 50 points. You also decided to make the town bleed for 30 points. You observed quietly for a while, thinking the timing wasn't right yet, gaining 10 points. That was fast. "You managed to find them already?" Lin Tian thought as he stared at the burning campfire. Although his current strength was on par with Lower, his companions were not to be underestimated. Right now, he could probably only kill Lower himself. You pressed the first option to act yourself. Kill Lower and his group for 50 points. The content was renewed again, and at the same time, the simulation images of the life scenario started. The scene transitioned, and The image of a female warrior appeared. Finally, you found an opportunity to face Lower alone, and decisively chose to attack. Lower was caught off guard and almost killed. Lower's master, the Saint Swordmaster of the Sword Clan, appeared. The Saint Swordmaster saved Lower. You died tragically under her sword. Soon after, Lower's hero party returned to the royal city and did not appear again. Summary. Against the powerful Saint Swordmaster of the Sword Clan, there was no chance of escaping. You must pay attention. 30 points were awarded for the failure. 100 points were given as a reward for the life simulation. The life simulation for this round was completed. The time progress was 9 days. After reading the content, Lin Tian's eyes widened in astonishment. What is this? The Saint Swordmaster of the Sword Clan, a combat strategist with such a high level of power. Why is she appearing in this small place? I don't understand. Moreover, it was unexpected that Lower's group would leave the Bright City. Once they left, it would be very difficult to find them again. If that's the case, there's not much time left. Damn it, I have to make use of the time I have. While he sat thinking of a solution, Goblin brought a tray of fruits to the elf matriarch. The elves, though prisoners, were still provided with food. Lin Tian turned to look at him and quietly pondered for a few seconds, as if he had thought of something. Got it. In the peaceful scene of food being served, Manhwa slowly stepped forward toward Goblin. He said, "In the next few days, I will visit the human warrior's territory. I'll leave everything in the tribe to you, Goblin, and you'll be in charge of handling things while I'm away." Goblin was startled. The elf matriarch was also shocked when she heard what he said. She quickly spoke. "Are you crazy? If you go to the human territory and get discovered, you'll be surrounded and killed." Lin Tian calmly looked at her and replied, "I have a grudge against humans. You just need to know that I must take revenge." The elf matriarch immediately said, "Then you can't go recklessly. Let me help you use the stealth skill on you. This way, humans won't notice you." Seeing her excited reaction, Goblin also turned to look at her. This idea was exactly what Lin Tian wanted. His eyes, hidden under his long hair, curved into a smile. "What I've been waiting for is this," he said. He gestured to the elf matriarch, smiling. "I didn't expect that you still care about my safety. It's really rare." She calmly closed her eyes and started to cast the skill. The elf matriarch cast a spell slowly and said, "I'm only afraid that if you die, Goblin and the others will treat us even more ruthlessly. Moreover, my children are all here. Only when you return safely will we be protected." She said this to reassure Lin Tian that she had no ulterior motives. At the same time, the elf matriarch awkwardly draped a cloak over him. Lin Tian just glanced at her. As expected, the leader of the elf clan, the elf matriarch, still understood the principles of life. Lin Tian took a long step forward toward Goblin. Goblin hurriedly called out, "Lin Tian, I'll help you take good care of the tribe." The elf matriarch watched his retreating figure, and without realizing it, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her gaze was unusually gentle. Lin Tian knew. He just waved his hand, and as his figure faded further into the night,